I overheard a strange conversation on my husband's phone. 2 more weeks of giving her the medication, and we can have her committed and finally be together. When I realized the number belonged to my daughter-in-law and my husband was cheating on me, I decided to take an action. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought a simple Wednesday afternoon would shatter my entire world. At 60, I believed I had seen enough of life's surprises. I was wrong. Everett had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went to shower. 35 years of marriage had taught me to respect his privacy, but when it started ringing insistently, I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Usually I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the persistent way it kept ringing, or maybe it was intuition warning me that my comfortable life was about to crumble. "Hello?" I answered, expecting a telemarketer or wrong number. Instead, I heard my husband's voice, muffled and distant, as if he was on speaker. He must have answered from the bathroom extension without realizing his cell was still connected. 2 more weeks of giving her the medication, Everett was saying, his tone casual, almost cheerful. Then we can have her committed and finally be together openly. My blood turned to ice. The phone trembled in my hands as I recognized the woman's voice responding. "I can't wait, baby. I'm so tired of pretending to care about her. The dosage you suggested is working perfectly. She's been so confused and forgetful lately. Elara, my daughter-in-law. The woman I had welcomed into our family 5 years ago when she married my son David. The woman who had been so attentive to me, always bringing me special vitamins and homemade meals, insisting I needed extra care at my age. Just make sure she takes the pills every day," Everett continued. "The psychiatric evaluation is already scheduled. Once she's declared incompetent, we'll have everything we need to be together." I slammed the phone down, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. My legs gave out, and I collapsed into the nearest chair, gasping for air. The kitchen around me seemed to spin, but for the first time in weeks, my mind felt crystal clear. They were poisoning me. My husband of 35 years and my own daughter-in-law were slowly destroying my sanity with medication, planning to have me locked away so they could be together. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and leaving me hollow inside. All those mornings when I woke up groggy and disoriented, the afternoons when I couldn't remember simple things, couldn't focus on conversations, the nights when I felt like I was losing myself, becoming a stranger in my own body. I had attributed it all to aging, to the natural decline that comes with being 60, but it wasn't natural at all. I sat there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, staring at the kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals for this family. The same kitchen where Elara had been bringing me those special smoothies, claiming they were packed with nutrients for women my age. The same kitchen where Everett would remind me to take my vitamins each morning, kissing my forehead with what I thought was love. My hands shook as I reached for the bottle of supplements Elara had given me just yesterday. The label looked legitimate, but now I wondered what was really inside those innocent-looking capsules. Had they been planning this for months? Years? The sound of the shower stopping upstairs jolted me back to reality. Everett would be down any minute, expecting to find his devoted wife of 35 years, the woman who had supported his career, raised his children, and built a life around his needs. He would expect to find the confused, forgetful woman I had been becoming under their careful manipulation. But something had shifted inside me with that phone call. The fog that had been clouding my thoughts for months seemed to lift, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity I hadn't felt in years. They thought they were so clever, so careful in their plan to destroy me. They had no idea they were dealing with a woman who had survived 60 years of life, who had raised 3 children largely on her own while Everett built his career, who had buried her parents and several friends, and who had more strength than they could imagine. I heard Everett's footsteps on the stairs. Quickly, I grabbed his phone and deleted the call log, then placed it exactly where he had left it. When he entered the kitchen, hair still damp from his shower, I was standing at the sink washing dishes with hands that no longer trembled. "Any calls?" he asked casually, picking up his phone. I turned to face him, studying the man I had loved for over 3 decades. His gray hair was perfectly styled, his blue eyes as charming as ever. He looked like the same man who had promised to love and cherish me until death do us part. But now I saw something different in his expression, something calculating that had probably been there all along. "No," I lied smoothly. "Just some telemarketer." I hung up. He nodded, already distracted by something on his phone screen. This was the man who was planning to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. This was the man who had been watching me decline under his careful poisoning, probably counting the days until he could be with Elara without hiding. "Elara's coming over later," he said without looking up. "She's bringing dinner, that new recipe she wanted you to try. Another meal, another opportunity to drug me. Another step toward their goal of having me declared incompetent, but this time, I would be ready." "That's nice of her," I replied, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "She's always so thoughtful." Everett glanced up and smiled, the same warm smile that had won my heart 40 years ago. But now it looked like a mask, hiding the monster underneath. "You're lucky to have such a caring daughter-in-law. Not every woman your age has someone who looks out for them so well." The irony was almost laughable. If I hadn't been so devastated, I might have appreciated the twisted humor of it all. Instead, I simply nodded and turned back to the dishes, already planning my next move. They wanted to play games with my mind and my life. They thought I was just a confused old woman, easy to manipulate and discard, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated me. And now that I knew what they were doing, I was going to make sure they regretted ever thinking they could destroy Faye Morrison. The war had begun, and they had no idea their victim was about to become their worst nightmare. That evening, I watched Elara move around my kitchen with new eyes. She had arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, carrying her usual offering, a casserole dish covered with aluminum foil, and that bright smile that had fooled me for so long. "How are you feeling today, Mom Morrison?" she asked, using the affectionate nickname she had adopted when she married David. The concern in her voice sounded so genuine, so caring. If I hadn't heard that phone conversation, I would have been touched by her attention. "A little tired," I admitted, which wasn't a lie. The emotional weight of the day's discovery had drained me completely. "But better now that you're here." She beamed at that, her blonde hair catching the light as she busied herself setting the table. Elara was beautiful. There was no denying that. At 32, she had the kind of effortless elegance that had probably caught many men's attention throughout her life, including, apparently, my husband's. "I brought your favorite tonight," she said, pulling out a covered dish. "Chicken and rice with those herbs you love. I added some extra ingredients that are supposed to help with memory and energy." Extra ingredients. My stomach clenched, but I forced myself to smile. "You're so thoughtful, sweetheart. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Oh, you'll never have to find out," she replied, and something in her tone made my skin crawl. "I'll always take care of you." As she served the food, I found myself studying her movements with forensic attention. Elara was a registered nurse, I remembered. She had met David at the hospital where she worked, during one of his visits to see a friend. She had access to medications, knowledge of dosages, and the training to know exactly how to incapacitate someone gradually without leaving obvious traces. The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place with terrifying clarity. Those special vitamins she had been bringing me for months, claiming they were specifically formulated for women over 60, the way she always insisted on preparing my morning coffee when she visited. The smoothies she made with superfoods that would boost my cognitive function. Every single gesture I had interpreted as love and care was actually an act of slow, methodical poisoning. "Where's David tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual as I pushed the food around my plate. I couldn't bring myself to take a bite, knowing what was probably in it. "Working late again," she sighed. "You know how dedicated he is to his patients." David was a veterinarian, often called away for emergencies. It occurred to me now that his schedule provided perfect cover for his wife's visits to his parents' house. How long had this been going on? How many times had she been here alone with me, slowly poisoning me while my son was away saving animals? Everett chose that moment to join us, appearing in the kitchen with the same warm smile he had given me for 35 years. "Smells wonderful in here," he said, kissing Elara's cheek in greeting. I watched the interaction carefully. There was nothing overtly inappropriate about it, but I noticed things I had missed before. The way his hand lingered on her shoulder, the way she looked up at him with an expression that went beyond mere affection for a father-in-law, the subtle intimacy that spoke of shared secrets and private moments. How long has this been going on? I wondered. But I already suspected I knew the answer. The memory came back to me with painful clarity. 6 months ago, when I had walked into the living room and found them sitting closer together on the couch than seemed necessary. At the time, I had dismissed it, telling myself I was imagining things. Elara had been showing Everett photos on her phone, and they had sprung apart when I entered, both looking slightly guilty. I had convinced myself it was nothing. Now I realized it was everything. "You're not eating much tonight, Mom Morrison," Elara observed, her brow furrowed with fake concern. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just not very hungry," I replied, taking a small bite to avoid suspicion. The food tasted normal, but knowing what was probably in it made it difficult to swallow. "My appetite hasn't been the same lately. That's exactly why I've been so worried about you," Everett said, reaching over to pat my hand. His touch, once comforting, now made my skin crawl. "You've been so forgetful, so tired. Maybe we should make an appointment with Dr. Hamilton. Dr. Hamilton, our family physician for over 20 years. I wondered if he was part of their plan, or if they intended to manipulate him as well. How easy would it be for a concerned husband and daughter-in-law to convince a doctor that an older woman was showing signs of dementia or depression, especially if that woman had been acting confused and disoriented for months due to unknown medication? "I've been thinking the same thing," Elara chimed in. "Maybe we should consider having someone come in to help you during the day, just until you're feeling better. A caregiver, someone to monitor me, to make sure I took my medication, to report back to them about my mental state. Another piece of their carefully constructed plan." "I don't think that's necessary," I said firmly. "I'm managing just fine on my own." Everett and Elara exchanged a look that they probably thought I was too confused to catch, but I saw it clearly, the silent communication between conspirators, the shared frustration that their victim wasn't cooperating as expected. "Of course you are, dear," Everett said in the patronizing tone that I now realized he had been using for months. "But it wouldn't hurt to have some extra help around the house, someone to make sure you don't forget to take your vitamins." Those vitamins again. I made a mental note to have them analyzed as soon as possible. If I was right, they would contain substances far more dangerous than the calcium and vitamin D listed on the label. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead of going upstairs, I slipped into Everett's home office. I had about 5 minutes before they would start looking for me, and I needed to search for evidence of their plan. Everett's computer was password protected, but I knew him well enough to guess. It was my birthday, the same password he had been using for years. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was using the date of my birth to hide his plan for my destruction. I didn't have time to dig deep, but a quick search of his recent documents revealed enough to confirm my worst fears. There were emails to psychiatric facilities, inquiries about long-term care options, and correspondence with a lawyer about updating our will, all dated within the past 3 months. My hands shook as I closed the browser and cleared the history. They weren't just planning to drug me into compliance. They were planning to erase me entirely, to lock me away where I couldn't interfere with their relationship or challenge their claim to my assets. "Faye, are you all right up there?" Everett's voice called from downstairs. "Just a minute," I called back, forcing my voice to sound weak and confused. If they wanted to see a declining old woman, I would give them exactly what they expected. It would make my eventual victory all the sweeter. When I returned to the kitchen, Elara was packing up the leftover food. "I'm leaving this for you to have tomorrow," she said, placing the container in my refrigerator. "Make sure you eat it all. You need to keep your strength up." More poison for tomorrow, more steps toward their goal. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, giving her what I hoped looked like a grateful smile. "You take such good care of me." She hugged me goodbye, and I forced myself not to recoil from her touch. "Get some rest tonight, Mom Morrison. And don't forget to take those vitamins I brought you." After they left, I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of their deception. The special meal sat in my refrigerator, waiting to continue its slow work of destroying my mind. The bottle of vitamins sat on the counter, innocent-looking capsules that were anything but innocent. For the first time since the phone call that afternoon, I allowed myself to truly feel the depth of their betrayal. 35 years of marriage, destroyed by greed and lust. A daughter-in-law I had loved like my own child, revealed as a calculating predator. The life I had built, the future I had planned, all of it hanging in the balance while two people I trusted plotted my destruction. But as I cleaned up the kitchen, disposing of the poisoned food and hiding the suspicious vitamins, I felt something unexpected growing inside me. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Not just hurt, though the pain was overwhelming. What I felt was determination, cold and sharp and absolutely unforgiving. They had made the mistake of underestimating me. They thought I was just a confused old woman, easy to manipulate and discard. But I had been taking care of myself and others for 60 years. I had survived losses and challenges they couldn't imagine. And now that I knew what they were doing, I was going to make sure they faced consequences they never saw coming. The game was just beginning, and I intended to win. The next morning, I woke up earlier than I had in months. For the first time in weeks, my head felt clear, my thoughts sharp. The absence of whatever they had been putting in my food was already making a difference, and I felt like myself again, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Everett was still asleep beside me, snoring softly like he had every morning for 35 years. Looking at him now, I felt nothing but disgust. This man had shared my bed, my dreams, my entire adult life. And all the while he had been planning my destruction. The urge to wake him up and confront him was almost overwhelming, but I forced myself to remain calm. I needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence of what they were doing. I slipped out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, where the bottle of vitamins sat exactly where Elara had left it. With hands that barely trembled, I opened the bottle and examined the capsules inside. They looked normal. Standard gel caps filled with what appeared to be vitamin powder. But appearances, I had learned, could be devastatingly deceiving. I carefully removed 3 capsules and placed them in a small plastic bag, then refilled the bottle with actual vitamins I found in my medicine cabinet. If anyone counted, they would find the same number of pills. But if they tested what I had taken, I would finally have proof of their poisoning. The next step was more difficult. I needed to document everything without arousing suspicion, which meant continuing to play the role of the confused, declining woman they expected to see. It was perhaps the most challenging performance of my life. When Everett came down for breakfast, I was standing at the stove making scrambled eggs, moving slowly and occasionally pausing as if I had forgotten what I was doing. "Morning, honey," he said, kissing my cheek with lips that felt like ice against my skin. "How did you sleep?" "Oh, I replied vaguely, letting my voice trail off as if I couldn't quite finish the thought. "I had some strange dreams." He studied my face with an expression I now recognized as clinical assessment rather than concern. "You should take your vitamins with breakfast," he suggested. "Elara says they'll help with the sleep issues." I nodded obediently and reached for the bottle, making sure he saw me take one of the replacement vitamins. "She's so good to me," I murmured. "I don't know what I'd do without her." "Neither do I," he replied. And the way he said it made my blood run cold. After Everett left for his morning walk, a routine he had started 3 months ago, around the time this poisoning campaign must have begun, I got to work. I had a narrow window before he returned, and I needed to make it count. First, I called my longtime friend Margaret, who had retired from her job as a lab technician 2 years ago. If anyone could help me test those pills discreetly, it would be her. "Faye?" Margaret's voice was surprised. "I haven't heard from you in weeks. How are you feeling? Everett mentioned you'd been having some health issues." Of course he had. They were already building the narrative, preparing everyone to believe I was declining mentally and physically. "I'm fine," I said firmly, "but I need a favor, and I need you to keep it completely confidential." I arranged to meet Margaret at a coffee shop across town, somewhere neither Everett nor Elara would think to look for me. Then I began the more dangerous part of my investigation, searching the house for evidence. Everett's office had yielded some information the night before, but I needed more. I started with Elara's purse, which she often left in our guest room when she visited. My hands shook as I rifled through her belongings, feeling like a thief in my own home. What I found made my stomach turn. Hidden in a side pocket was a small vial of clear liquid with no label, along with several syringes. There were also handwritten notes in her neat nursing script. Morning dose, 2 ml in coffee. Evening, 1 capsule with dinner. Increase by 0. 5 ml weekly. They had been keeping detailed records of how they were poisoning me, tracking my decline like a science experiment. The clinical coldness of it was perhaps worse than the betrayal itself. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully replaced the items exactly as I had found them. Evidence was useless if they discovered I had been snooping. Next, I searched the kitchen more thoroughly. In the back of the spice cabinet, behind bottles I rarely used, I found another small container of pills that looked identical to my vitamins, but felt slightly different in weight. These must be the real ones, the poison disguised as health supplements. By the time Everett returned from his walk, I was back in the living room, sitting in my favorite chair with a book in my lap, staring at the pages with a vacant expression I had perfected over the past 24 hours. "How are you feeling this morning?" he asked, settling into his chair with the newspaper. "Tired," I admitted, "and confused. I keep forgetting things. Maybe you should lie down for a while," he suggested. "Rest is important for someone your age." Someone your age. The condescension in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. He was already talking to me like I was an invalid, someone who couldn't be trusted to make her own decisions. "That might be a good idea," I agreed, closing the book with fumbling fingers. "Will you wake me if Elara calls?" "Of course, dear," he said. But he was already focused on his newspaper, probably confident that his morning dose of poison would keep me docile for hours. Instead of napping, I spent the afternoon setting up a security system. Not the obvious kind that would alert them to my suspicions, but something more subtle. I ordered tiny cameras online, the kind designed for home security that could be hidden in everyday objects. If I was going to expose them, I needed video evidence of them tampering with my food and medication. That evening, Elara arrived with another special meal and her usual bright smile. Watching her move through my kitchen, knowing what she was really doing, felt like watching a spider weave its web around a trapped fly. The fly just happened to be me. "You look a little better tonight," she observed, setting down a casserole dish. "More alert." I forced my expression to cloud with confusion. "Do I? I can't tell anymore. Everything feels so foggy lately." "That's normal," she said quickly. "It's just your body adjusting to getting older. The vitamins will help, but it takes time." She busied herself heating up the food, and I watched carefully as she added something from a small container to my portion. The movement was so quick and practiced that I almost missed it, but now that I knew what to look for, it was obvious. "I spoke with Dr. Hamilton's office today," she said casually as she stirred the food. "I think you should have a complete physical, just to make sure everything's okay." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice level. "Do you think that's necessary?" "It's just a precaution," she assured me. "But I'm a little concerned about some of your symptoms. The memory issues, the confusion, the mood swings. It might be worth exploring some treatment options." Treatment options. I could only imagine what those might involve. Stronger medications to ensure my compliance, perhaps, or recommendations for specialized care in a facility where they could control every aspect of my life. "If you think it's best," I said meekly. "You know so much more about these things than I do." She smiled and patted my hand. "I just want what's best for you, Mom Morrison. We all do." After she left, I sat staring at the poisoned food, feeling the full weight of their deception. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every kindness, every gesture of care, every moment of seeming affection had been calculated to serve their ultimate goal, getting me out of the way so they could be together and enjoy the life I had helped build. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that a 60-year-old woman would be easy to fool, easy to manipulate, easy to discard. They had underestimated the strength that comes from surviving 6 decades of life, from raising children and building a career and weathering every storm that came my way. I disposed of the poisoned food and took more photographs of the evidence I had collected. Tomorrow, I would meet with Margaret and get those pills tested. I would start building a case that would not only expose their crimes, but ensure they faced consequences for what they had done to me. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. For months, I had been looking at a stranger, a confused, frail woman who seemed to be fading away. But tonight, I saw someone different. I saw a woman who had discovered she was stronger than she ever knew. A woman who refused to be a victim. They wanted to destroy me, to erase me from my own life. Instead, they had awakened something in me that I hadn't felt in years, the fierce determination to fight back, to reclaim what was mine, and to make sure they paid for every single day they had stolen from me. The game was far from over, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I was confident about who would win. Margaret's call came 3 days later while I was pretending to nap in the living room. Everett was in his office, probably researching more psychiatric facilities, so I answered quickly and kept my voice low. "Faye, we need to talk." Margaret's voice was tight with concern. "Those pills you gave me. What you suspected was right. They contain a cocktail of sedatives and anti-anxiety medications that would definitely cause confusion, memory loss, and disorientation. Whoever has been giving these to you has been systematically drugging you for months. Even though I had known the truth, hearing it confirmed hit me like a physical blow." "How much damage could they have done?" I whispered. "Long term? Probably not much, since you stopped taking them when you did. But Faye..." Margaret's voice dropped. "The combination they were using could have killed you if they'd increased the dosage much more. This isn't just about making you compliant. At higher levels, this could cause respiratory depression, cardiac issues. You need to take this to the police." After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my living room, letting the full reality sink in. They hadn't just been planning to have me committed. They had been willing to risk killing me to get what they wanted. The casual evil of it was breathtaking, but I wasn't ready to involve the police yet. I wanted them to confess, to reveal the full scope of their plan, to show their true faces without the masks they had been wearing for so long, and I had an idea of exactly how to make that happen. Over the next 2 days, I played my role perfectly. I was more confused than ever, more dependent on their help. I made several obvious mistakes, leaving the stove on, forgetting appointments, losing my keys, that would reinforce their belief that their plan was working. Each performance was carefully calculated to make them overconfident. "I'm really worried about you, honey," Everett said after I had pretended to forget our neighbor's name during a conversation. "Maybe we should move up that doctor's appointment." "I think that's a good idea," I agreed, letting my voice waver with uncertainty. "I feel like I'm losing myself." The satisfaction in his eyes made me sick, but I forced myself to look vulnerable and scared. He was enjoying this, I realized. He wasn't just tolerating my decline as a necessary step toward his goal. He was actively pleased to see me suffer. That night, I made the phone calls that would set my trap. The first was to my son David, asking him to come to dinner on Saturday night. "I want to have a family meal," I told him, making my voice sound fragile and sentimental. "I feel like we don't spend enough time together anymore." David was immediately concerned about my emotional state, which was exactly what I had hoped for. "Of course, Mom. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself and Elara," I said. "I want to cook for my family one more time." The phrase, "one more time," was deliberate, designed to make them think I was giving up, surrendering to whatever fate they had planned for me. It would make them careless, more likely to reveal their true feelings. My second call was to my daughter Sarah, who lived 2 hours away but would come if I asked. "I need you here Saturday night," I told her. "It's important, but don't tell anyone you're coming. I want it to be a surprise." Sarah had always been intuitive, and I heard the concern in her voice. "Mom, are you okay? You sound different." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I assured her. "I just need my family around me right now." The final piece of my plan required the most courage. I needed to record their conversation, to capture their confession on video that could serve as evidence later. The tiny cameras I had ordered online were perfect for this purpose. Small enough to hide but sophisticated enough to capture clear audio and video. I spent Friday afternoon setting up the recording devices throughout the dining room and living room, hiding them in picture frames, flower arrangements, and decorative objects that had been in those rooms for years. If everything went according to plan, I would have multiple angles of whatever confession I could provoke. Saturday morning, I began preparing what I privately thought of as the Last Supper, though I intended for it to be their last meal in my house, not mine. I cooked all of Everett's favorite foods, put fresh flowers on the table, and even opened a bottle of expensive wine we had been saving for a special occasion. If I was going to destroy my marriage and expose my daughter-in-law's treachery, I might as well do it in style. As I worked in the kitchen, memories flooded back. 35 years of family dinners, holiday celebrations, birthday parties. This house had been filled with laughter and love, or what I had thought was love. How many of those moments had been genuine? How long had Everett been planning to replace me with someone younger, more convenient? "Something smells wonderful," Everett said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "You've outdone yourself tonight." I smiled at him, the expression feeling like broken glass on my face. I wanted tonight to be special. For us. He came up behind me and put his arms around my waist, a gesture that once would have made me feel loved and secure. Now it felt like a snake coiling around its prey. "I love you, Faye," he murmured against my ear. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired his skill. Almost. "I love you too," I replied, and for the first time in days, I wasn't acting. I had loved him, completely and without reservation, for 35 years. The fact that he could throw that away for a younger woman's attention was perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this entire nightmare. David and Elara arrived at 6 o'clock, with David carrying flowers, and Elara bearing her usual offering of special supplements for me. "I brought you a new multivitamin," she said, kissing my cheek with lips that felt like ice. "This one is specifically designed for cognitive function. More poison, wrapped in the guise of care." I accepted the bottle with trembling hands, playing the role of the grateful, confused victim one last time. "You're so good to me, sweetheart," I said, loud enough for the hidden cameras to capture. "I don't know what I would do without you taking care of me." "You'll never have to find out," she replied, and the promise in her voice sounded more like a threat. We made small talk during cocktails, the conversation flowing with the ease of people who had shared hundreds of evenings like this one. But underneath the familiar rhythm, I could feel the tension building. Everett and Elara kept exchanging glances, and I noticed how they positioned themselves near each other, how their body language suggested an intimacy that went far beyond appropriate family relationships. At 7:30, just as I was about to suggest we move to the dining room, the doorbell rang. "I wonder who that could be," I said innocently, though my heart was pounding with anticipation. When I opened the door, Sarah stood there with a confused expression on her face. "Mom? I thought you said—" "Oh." Her eyes took in the scene behind me, the family dinner I had apparently forgotten to mention, the elegant table setting, the obvious special occasion atmosphere. "Sarah!" David jumped up in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Sarah looked between me and the others, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. "Mom asked me to come. She said it was important." Now, all eyes were on me, and I let confusion cloud my expression as if I genuinely couldn't remember making the phone call. "Did I?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I've been so forgetful lately." The look that passed between Everett and Elara was electric with tension. This wasn't part of their plan, and they didn't know how to handle the deviation from their script. "It's fine," Elara said quickly, her nursing training kicking in as she moved to manage the situation. "We can set another place. The more family, the better." But I could see the calculation in her eyes, the rapid assessment of how Sarah's unexpected presence might affect whatever they had planned for tonight. They had been counting on this being an intimate family dinner, where they could continue to reinforce the narrative of my declining mental state. Sarah's arrival changed the dynamic entirely. As we finally sat down to dinner, I looked around the table at the people who had once represented everything I loved most in the world. My husband of 35 years, who was planning to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. My daughter-in-law, who had been systematically poisoning me while pretending to care. My son, who remained oblivious to the betrayal happening right under his nose. And my daughter, who sensed something was wrong but couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. The stage was set, the cameras were recording, and I was ready to bring this charade to an end. What they didn't know was that by the end of this meal, everyone at this table would know exactly what kind of people Everett Morrison and Elara Morrison really were. I raised my wine glass, my hand steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, my voice clear and strong for the first time in months, to family, to the people we trust most in the world. As they raised their glasses, I saw my reflection in the dining room mirror behind them. For the first time in months, I looked like myself again, not a victim, but a woman who was about to reclaim her life and destroy the people who had tried to steal it from her. We clinked glasses and drank, the wine tasting bitter with the weight of what I was about to reveal. I had planned this moment for days, but now that it was here, my heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. "This is lovely, Mom," David said, cutting into his steak. "You really outdid yourself tonight." I smiled at my son, memorizing his face in this last moment of innocence. In a few minutes, his world would shatter just as completely as mine had when I overheard that phone conversation. But he deserved to know the truth, even if it destroyed him. "I wanted tonight to be special," I said, setting down my wine glass with deliberate care, "because I have something important to tell all of you." Sarah looked up sharply, her maternal instincts picking up on something in my tone. Everett went very still, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Elara's smile faltered, replaced by a wariness that she tried to hide behind another sip of wine. "Actually," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word, "I have several things to tell you. Starting with the fact that I know exactly what's been happening to me." The silence that followed was deafening. David looked confused, Sarah concerned, but it was the expressions on Everett and Elara's faces that confirmed everything I had suspected. Guilt, fear, and underneath it all, a cold calculation, as they tried to figure out how much I knew and how to contain the damage. "Mom, what are you talking about?" David asked, his voice gentle but puzzled. I reached into my purse and pulled out the bottle of vitamins Elara had given me that evening, setting it on the table with a soft click. "I'm talking about these, the special supplements that my loving daughter-in-law has been bringing me for months, the ones that have been making me confused and forgetful and tired." Elara's face went pale, but she maintained her composure with impressive skill. "Mom Morrison, you're not making sense. Those are just vitamins. They're supposed to help you feel better." "You're right. They are vitamins," I agreed. "But the ones you've been giving me contain something extra. Something that a lab analysis confirmed contains a cocktail of sedatives and anti-anxiety medications designed to impair my cognitive function." David's fork clattered to his plate. "What? That's impossible. Elara would never, wouldn't she?" I turned to look at my daughter-in-law, who was now gripping her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Tell him, Elara. Tell my son about the detailed notes you keep tracking my dosages. Tell him about the syringes and unmarked vials I found in your purse." "I don't know what you're talking about," Elara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're confused, Mom Morrison. You've been having episodes lately, forgetting things, getting paranoid." "Have I?" I asked, pulling out my phone. Because I seemed to remember quite clearly recording this conversation 3 days ago. I pressed play, and Everett's voice filled the dining room, clear and damning. 2 more weeks of giving her the medication. Then we can have her committed and finally be together openly." The effect was instantaneous and devastating. David's face went white as Elara's voice followed. "I can't wait, baby. I'm so tired of pretending to care about her," Sarah gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. David looked like someone had just told him his entire life was a lie, which, in a way, was exactly what had happened. "This isn't," David started, then stopped, his eyes moving between his wife and his father. "This can't be real." "It's very real," I said. keeping my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Your wife and your father have been having an affair while systematically poisoning me with the goal of having me declared mentally incompetent, so they could be together without the inconvenience of a divorce or the scandal of adultery. Everett finally found his voice. Faye, you're taking this out of context. That conversation wasn't. Wasn't what? I snapped, my composure finally cracking. Wasn't you planning to drug me into a psychiatric facility so you could openly sleep with our son's wife? Wasn't you counting down the days until you could have me locked away like some inconvenient secret? You don't understand, Elara said desperately, turning to David with tears in her eyes. Your mother has been so difficult lately, so paranoid and accusatory. We were just trying to help her. By poisoning her? Sarah's voice cut through the air like a whip. By planning to have her committed to a mental institution? It wasn't supposed to be permanent, Everett said, and the casual way he said it made my blood run cold. Just until she could get the help she needs. The help I need? I laughed, and the sound was bitter and sharp. The only help I needed was protection from the two people I trusted most in the world. David had been silent through this exchange, staring down at his plate as if it contained the answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a pain so deep it made my heart ache for him. How long? He asked quietly. Elara reached for his hand, but he pulled away from her touch like she was toxic. David, please. How long have you been sleeping with my father? It's not what you think, she said, but even she seemed to realize how hollow that sounded. 8 months, Everett answered when she couldn't. It started 8 months ago. I felt something break inside me at the confirmation. 8 months of lies, of betrayal, of watching me decline under their careful poisoning while they planned their future together. 8 months of Everett sleeping beside me every night while dreaming of another woman. 8 months of Elara kissing my cheek and calling me Mom while secretly working to destroy me. 8 months, I repeated. And how long have you been drugging me? They exchanged a look, and I saw the moment they decided to stop pretending. 6 months, Elara said quietly, since we decided to be together permanently. Permanently, Sarah said, her voice shaking with rage. You mean since you decided to get rid of Mom? We weren't going to hurt her, Everett protested. But the words sounded weak even to him. The plan was to have her cared for in a nice facility, somewhere she would be safe and comfortable. While you took over her life, her home, her assets, Sarah shot back. How convenient. David finally spoke again, his voice hollow with devastation. All those times you said you were working late, you were with him. All those times you came here to check on Mom, you were poisoning her. And his voice broke. I thanked you for taking such good care of her. The pain in my son's voice was almost unbearable. In trying to destroy me, they had also destroyed him, shattered his faith in love and family, and everything he had believed about his life. David, please listen, Elara begged. I do care about your mother. I never wanted to hurt her. You were killing her, Sarah said flatly. That combination of drugs could have caused cardiac arrest or respiratory failure. You were willing to kill our mother to get what you wanted. That's not true, Elara protested, but she couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Isn't it? I asked. Because according to the lab analysis, if you had increased the dosage much more, that's exactly what would have happened. Were you planning to increase it, Elara? Was the next step in your plan to give me a fatal overdose and make it look like an accident? Her silence was answer enough. The room felt like a tomb, heavy with the weight of revelations that could never be taken back. David was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face as he stared at the woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with his heart and his family. Sarah looked like she wanted to reach across the table and strangle both Everett and Elara with her bare hands. I want you both out of my house, I said finally, my voice steady and cold. Now, tonight. And I never want to see either of you again. Faye, please, Everett started, but I held up my hand to stop him. You've said enough. You've done enough. The only reason I'm not calling the police right now is because I want you to understand exactly what you've lost before I destroy you completely. Elara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. You can't prove any of this." I smiled, and it felt like ice forming on my lips. "Actually, I can. Every conversation in this room tonight has been recorded by multiple cameras. Every word you've spoken, every confession you've made, every moment of truth you've revealed is now documented evidence that will hold up in any court of law." The blood drained from both their faces as they realized the full scope of their defeat. They had walked into my trap so completely, so willingly, that they had handed me everything I needed to destroy them both. "You set us up," Everett said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he looked at me with something approaching respect. "I protected myself," I corrected. "Something I should have been able to trust you to do for the past 35 years. As they gathered their things to leave, I watched them with the cold satisfaction of someone who had just won a war they never knew they were fighting. But victory, I was discovering, tasted nothing like I had expected. It was bitter and hollow, and tinged with a sadness that went deeper than anger or betrayal. When the door closed behind them, the three of us sat in silence for a long moment, surrounded by the wreckage of our family dinner and our family itself. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and police reports and the painful process of rebuilding a life that had been nearly destroyed by the people I had trusted most. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was finally free to be myself again. Not the confused, declining woman they had tried to make me, but the strong, determined woman I had always been. The woman who had just reclaimed her life from the people who had tried to steal it. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new cottage, morning sunlight streaming through windows that looked out onto a garden I had planted with my own hands. The silence was profound, not the oppressive quiet of deception and manipulation, but the peaceful stillness of a life finally lived on my own terms. The cottage was small, nothing like the grand house where I had spent 35 years of marriage, but every inch of it belonged to me. No hidden cameras needed here. No locked doors or suspicious glances. Just space to breathe, to heal, to remember who I was before they tried to erase me. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Coffee later? I have news about the trial." The legal proceedings had been swift once the evidence was presented. The recordings from that final dinner, combined with the lab analysis of the poisoned supplements and the medical records showing the systematic poisoning, had built an airtight case. Everett and Elara had both been charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Their lawyers had tried to negotiate plea deals, but I had refused every offer. They would face trial for what they had done to me. David had filed for divorce within a week of that devastating dinner. The annulment had been finalized 3 months ago, and he was slowly rebuilding his life with the help of a therapist who specialized in family trauma. We met for lunch once a week now, these quiet meals where we talked about everything except the people who had betrayed us both. He was dating someone new, a kind woman named Rebecca who worked at the animal shelter where he volunteered on weekends. She had gentle eyes and a laugh that didn't sound calculated, and when I saw them together, I felt hopeful for the first time in months that good people still existed in this world. "Mom?" Sarah's voice called from the front door. She had taken to stopping by unannounced, something that would have annoyed me in my old life but now felt like a gift. She was protective of me in ways she had never been before, as if nearly losing me had awakened something fierce and maternal in my grown daughter. "In the kitchen," I called back, pouring 2 cups of coffee from the pot I had learned to make perfectly for one person who sometimes had visitors. Sarah entered with her laptop bag and a folder thick with legal documents. As the victim advocate assigned to my case, she had thrown herself into ensuring justice with the same determination she brought to everything in her life. "The prosecutor called this morning," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "They found something else." I raised an eyebrow, curious but no longer afraid. Nothing they could discover would shock me now. I had already learned the worst about the people I had loved. "Elara's been doing this before," Sarah continued, opening the folder. "They found evidence that she targeted at least 2 other elderly patients during her nursing career. Both died under suspicious circumstances, but the deaths were attributed to natural causes at the time." A chill ran down my spine. I had been lucky to discover their plan when I did. If I had remained oblivious for much longer, I might have become another natural causes statistic in Elara's pattern of predatory behavior. They're upgrading the charges, Sarah said. Multiple counts of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and they're reopening the investigations into those previous deaths. I sipped my coffee, feeling a grim satisfaction. Justice, it seemed, had a long memory and an even longer reach. What about Everett? I asked. Sarah's expression darkened. He's trying to claim he was manipulated by Elara, that she seduced him into the scheme. His lawyer is painting him as another victim. I laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. 35 years of marriage, and he still thinks I don't know him well enough to see through his lies. The prosecutor isn't buying it, Sarah assured me. The recorded conversations make it clear he was an equal partner in planning your elimination. Elimination. Such a clinical word for murder, for the systematic erasure of a person's life and identity. But clinical was exactly what their plan had been. Cold, calculated, and completely without remorse until they were caught. There's something else, Sarah said, her tone gentling. The insurance investigation found irregularities in the life insurance policy Everett took out on you 8 months ago. He increased your coverage to $2 million right around the time the affair started. $2 million, the price they had placed on my life, or rather, on my death. It was almost flattering in a twisted way. At least they had considered me valuable, even if only as a corpse. Well, I said, stirring cream into my coffee with steady hands, at least I know what I was worth to them. You're worth so much more than that, Mom, Sarah said fiercely, to all of us who really love you. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I know that now. It just took me 60 years to figure out the difference between people who love you and people who use you. After Sarah left for work, I walked through my small garden, checking on the tomatoes and herbs I had planted when I moved in. Gardening had become a form of meditation for me, a way to connect with something real and growing and honest. Plants didn't lie or manipulate or scheme. They either thrived under your care or they didn't, and their honesty was refreshing after months of deception. My phone rang as I was deadheading roses. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. I wasn't afraid of phone calls anymore. Faye, Everett's voice was thin and desperate. Please don't hang up. I considered it, then decided I was curious to hear what he had to say after 6 months of silence. You have 2 minutes. I want you to know that I never meant for it to go as far as it did, he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Elara. She convinced me that you were declining anyway, that we were just helping speed up the inevitable. The inevitable, I repeated. You mean my death? Not death, he protested. Just transition to a place where you could be cared for properly. While you and my daughter-in-law enjoyed my house, my money, and my absence, silence stretched between us, filled with 35 years of shared history that felt like someone else's life now. I loved you once, he said finally. I want you to know that. Once, I agreed, but not enough to keep loving me when something better came along. Faye, please, save it for your therapist, Everett. Or better yet, save it for your cellmate. I hung up and blocked the number, then stood in my garden, breathing in the clean air and feeling lighter than I had in months. His voice had no power over me anymore. His words couldn't hurt me, couldn't make me doubt myself or question my worth. That frightened, confused woman they had tried to create was gone, replaced by someone stronger than I had ever imagined I could be. That evening, David came by with takeout Chinese food and stories about his day at the veterinary clinic. We ate on my small patio, surrounded by the flowers I had planted and the wind chimes Sarah had given me for my new home. As we talked about everything and nothing, I watched my son's face relax in ways it hadn't in months. The haunted look was fading, replaced by something that might eventually become peace. I've been thinking about moving, he said as we cleaned up the dinner containers. Starting fresh somewhere new. That might be good for you, I agreed. Sometimes a change of scenery helps you see yourself more clearly. He smiled at that, the first genuine smile I had seen from him since that terrible dinner 6 months ago. Is that what this place is for you? A way to see yourself clearly? I looked around my small cottage, at the life I had built from the ruins of my marriage, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This place is me remembering who I was before I became who they wanted me to be. And who is that? He asked. I considered the question seriously. Someone who doesn't need anyone else's permission to exist. Someone who knows her own worth. Someone who won't be anyone's victim ever again. 3 weeks later, Sarah called with the news I had been expecting. Both Everett and Elara had been found guilty on all charges. Everett received 15 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. Elara, with her history of targeting elderly patients, was sentenced to life without parole. "It's over, Mom," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "They can't hurt you anymore." But I had already known it was over. It had been over the moment I stopped being afraid of them, the moment I chose to fight back instead of accepting the role of victim they had assigned me. The trial was just paperwork, legal formalities to close a chapter that had already ended in my heart. That night, I sat on my patio with a glass of wine, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Everett was beginning his first night in prison, probably still convinced that he was the real victim in this story. Elara was facing the rest of her life behind bars. Her predatory career finally ended, but I was here, in my own space, surrounded by things I had chosen, and people who loved me without conditions or ulterior motives. At 60, I had discovered something many people never learn, that the most profound freedom comes not from getting what you want, but from no longer needing what you thought you couldn't live without. I raised my glass to the stars, to the woman I had been, and the woman I had become. "To second chances," I said aloud, my voice clear and strong in the quiet evening air. "And to never forgetting that you're stronger than the people who try to break you." The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility, of peace, of a future that belonged entirely to me. And for the first time in my adult life, that was more than enough. I was 60 years old, and my life was just beginning. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.